I'm delighted to introduce our final guest speaker today. We have Mark Lowe, Sitecore Architect from KeyCoders. Mark unfortunately couldn't join us today due to the pandemic, so he's being live streamed from Switzerland. Welcome to you, Mark, and I'll hand over to you now.
Okay, so the agenda for this talk is going to be, first, let's have a look at the connector, just the basics. I'm sure most of you have at least seen how this connector works. So I'm just going to brush up the basics. And then we're going to look at tracking asset usage in the CMS and why that's important. And then we're going to write additional metadata into fields. And in the end, some architectural considerations. And I'm going to try a short live demo. Let's pray to the demo gods that it works. So let's have a look at the connector. So if you are on Content Hub version 4 or higher, Sitecore recommends you to use this Sitecore Connect for Content Hub connector. There is an older version around that's just for the DAM part. But this connector includes two main parts. One is still a Sitecore Connect for Content Hub DAM, which allows you to browse and insert image assets into fields. I have a short video of how that looks. So you have on an image field, you can click an extra button, select a rendition, or select a public link, or create a new public link. Yeah. Was a bit quick. We'll see that again afterwards. A second use case we have for this DAM connector is we can insert images into rich text. There's a button there. Also, you can pick one of these images. This example, I've chosen to create a custom public link with a crop. Takes a few seconds to create the public link because it gets transferred to the CDN. And it's going to be done now. And well, you can select and insert into any rich text field. Okay. So we just briefly saw it before. There's an asset chooser interface that pops up whenever you click the button. This interface can be customized. This is just another page within Content Hub, and you have all the nice customization features of the search widget, and you can even create tabs and quite a few things. So this is just this screenshot is just an example of a customer site, customer implementation where we did quite a bit of customization on this. So this is, pretty straightforward to do this. You don't need any code. You could actually even insert custom code into here if you wanted to. So the second portion of this connector, I'm just going to keep it with the basics here, is the CMP bit. And here you can sync content entities from Content Hub into Sitecore items. You can set up mappings between templates and fields and Content Hub entities and fields. And you can sync them, and it nicely synchronizes them into buckets in your Sitecore tree for you to then do things with it. Okay. So this leads me to our first customization that we could do, is how can we track asset usage? First thing we need to understand is how Sitecore stores these assets within the CMS. There are no items. So anyone who's been around long enough to know the media library, every asset has one item, is basically attached to an item. So a media, like an image field, has a link to this item, and we can track usage through the link database. This is not the case with references to Sitecore. All that is actually stored within the raw value of an image field is an XML snippet like this one. So we have the Stylabs content ID. This is the asset ID from Content Hub. We have a thumbnail link. We have the actual public link that we are going to use, and just some basic metadata like an alt text. I believe this is mapped to the title field, and a height and a width. So that's all that we have from the connector. So how can we keep track of these references? We don't have link database. How can I know which of my items reference a specific DAM asset? So what we can do is we can store these assets in an index field. I'm sorry, this is a bit code heavy. I hope you can read it on the screen. So basically what this code snippet does, we hook a computed field into the Sitecore master index, and this computed field iterates through every field, and if it's field type image, it's going to read the XML attribute Stylabs content ID, and it's going to add it to a list. So I mean, an item can have multiple image fields, so we're going to ideally have a list of assets that this item is referencing. Once we have it nicely stored in an index, we can do queries on it. This is just a basic query on the Sitecore master index, where we can say, yeah, this Content Hub asset IDs contains the ID that I'm searching for, and it should just return all Sitecore items that have a reference. So I actually created a blog post a couple of days ago on this topic. The link is on this slide. I hope the slides will be shared afterwards, and otherwise I have the link to my blog on the last slide, where this is like laid out in a bit more detail. So we have a cool use case we did for the client I'm currently working for. Let's say we want to show asset usage within Content Hub, like on an asset details page. Show me which Sitecore items are actually currently using this asset. Can do this. Let's show a short clip. So this is an asset details page. Let's scroll down and show my usage. And here we go. We have all items that have this asset reference. I can even click on it and it jumps straight away onto my Sitecore content management, onto my item that has the reference. That's pretty nice for authors, because otherwise keeping track of these assets would be, yeah, pretty tedious. So how does this work? It's a bit on the creative side, and the way we implemented this widget. It is a widget, an external component, how it's called on Content Hub. And this external component built in JavaScript calls the Sitecore CM and says, yeah, give me all references for asset 31002. And the Sitecore CM then asks its index that we have configured and returns some data on these references. We can then nicely create an output in the user interface and have some nice links created back to these actual assets, these actual items. For those of you who would like to see this in more detail, I also have a blog post on this topic linked above. Just exactly laid out how you can implement this widget. It doesn't have to exactly look like this, but this will be an idea. So now let's talk about metadata. We have a lot of data joined to any asset on Content Hub. That's what it does really good. So and we can customize it. So I have, for instance, created a customized field with some custom data in it. It can be anything. I would now like to use this data in my CMS. I would like to display it on the actual website. So how can I do this? Because in the basic implementation of this stem connector just transfers the title and nothing else. So how can I get my custom field into my CMS world? Wouldn't it be great if we have something like this? We have this XML structure extended with more useful information like the file size, extension, custom fields, maybe the rendition. And wouldn't it be nice to actually have it displayed right in the image field? Well, this can be done. Let's show a video first, how this looks. Yeah, here we have custom metadata. Let's write something. And then go and pick that asset through the asset chooser. There we go. Let's save. And then we have this additional data. Yeah. Okay, let's change it just to prove that it's not fake. Can now hit refresh. And there we go. It fetches the new metadata directly from Content Hub. So how is this done? How does it work? We need to extend the image field control and actually extending the image control. Image control is already an extended image field that manages this this button and all the Sitecore Content Hub features with this image field, and we can nicely hook into this and add some additional code, because what we need to do is the moment an asset is picked and transferred to this image field, we need to do another call to Content Hub through its API and fetch the additional information. Unfortunately, there's no way of fetching it right through this first connection. We had a look into that, decompiled some sources, but this would probably need to be done on Content Hub side of this connector. So the only thing left for us to do is go ask again for this additional data. Works very well. Okay, so this is upon choosing an asset, but what happens if someone changes this metadata and no one thinks of updating the CMS? What we can do is we can set up a save trigger and an action, and this will write save messages into an Azure queue. It basically writes asset ID with this number has changed. It actually even includes a change set, which field has changed, which field values. All we actually need for this implementation is the actual ID of what has changed. What we then did, we set up a scheduled job that fetches the last 50 or so entries every couple of minutes and then processes them and checks the index. Do we actually have any references to this ID? And if yes, go and fetch the most current metadata. and then update all the items that are indexing or in the index. Yeah, that's how this works. There are other ways of doing this out there. Next slide has a link to a different approach, slightly different approach, where the Sitecore CM is directly connected to the Azure queue through Rebus. This is also a fascinating way of hooking everything up. We didn't do it this way because we were a bit concerned about mass changes on Content Hub, potentially bringing down the CM instance. If an author changes 20,000 assets or an asset that is used in many items, we are basically creating a lot of save and publish operations. That's why we like to have it a bit more on the lazy side with a scheduled job. But I guess that's up to you, up to the situation and the user requirements. So here is this post by Anna Brühlmann. She also has a fantastic blog with many Content Hub related tips. Okay. So we already have one foot in architectural considerations. One more, I want to show a thing we did with my last client. How we can decouple Content Hub Content Hub related code from the CMS solution. In the example before, upon picking an asset through the asset chooser, Sitecore CM creates an mClient session. mClient is the Stylabs Sitecore Content Hub SDK, and it opens a connection and fetches the metadata and updates the items. If you just need one additional field or something like that, that's fine. It's probably the best way to do it. But what if you have a lot of business logic related to these Content Hub assets, like we did it this way in the last project. I'll show an example afterwards. We created a facade, that's how we call it, the facade service, which is a .NET Core service that lives on its own, basically, has nothing to do with the Sitecore CM, and all it does is create a connection to Content Hub through mClient and fetch data if we ask it to do so. So we have all Content Hub logic around connective, like the user for and endpoint information. We have business logic around public links and much more in this facade. We have the client I'm working for has a quite extensive requirements towards Content Hub, with also creating public links on specific events and much more. That's why we decided to just move all this business logic into this facade service and just have Sitecore do basic HTTP calls. We just get back a nice JSON object with all data that we need. Sitecore CM doesn't have to deal with Content Hub specific implementation. So yeah, pros, it's all separated, easy to build and test because, hey, it's .NET Core. We have cons is we need a separate deployment, but yeah, because it's .NET Core, it can be easily containerized, so deployment is not that big of an issue. Okay, I have a few minutes left, so I'll try to do a live demo, and let's see if this works. No, that was just my backup video. Let's have a look if we get this to work. I hope you can see my screen more or less. I'll zoom in a little bit more, but it might be a bit hard to read, but I hope you can still get the basic idea. So this code solution here, this is a Content Hub facade service. Just a very basic version I did for this demo. It has one controller with one action, assets, and I'm going to show afterwards. So what it does, it fetches the asset from Content Hub. It fetches file information like this main file property and decodes the information on here, like content type, extension, file type. We have pages for PDFs. That's quite handy. And here we have this my custom field property that I created for this demo. And it's also going to read this. And we also have quite a bit more around public links, which I'm not going to go into detail here. I'll share all of this code to a GitHub repo right after this presentation. Okay, so let's start this facade service. Hope it works. I'm going to align it on the right-hand side, zoom in a little. Here we go. And let's open the browser. That's not what I wanted. This one I wanted. So my session is certainly ended. Let's start with this sandbox instance. Great, I'm still logged in. Just going to show you that this is a real demo and not a video. I already wrote hello London here. Let's say it might be a little early, but hey, there's a Christmas tree. Okay, I updated this data. Let's go to localhost, call my API, and this is asset 31002. So let's just call it. You can see something's getting fired up here. Yeah, it got through. So we have nicely curated metadata here. For those of you who know the Content Hub API, it's just going to return tons of information around this asset, basically everything, but you might just need the extension or the file size. You don't need relations to states or any other things. So that's the beauty of this facade service. It just returns what you need in your application. So we have this custom field. It returns the most current data. Let's go to the CMS. Secret password there. Dive into content editor. Let's clear this, save, and have a look. I'm going to go and grab this asset again. Select the original. And you can see something flickered up here. Let's save. And we can see here, oh, nice. It went and fetched this data. And we can see the actual call here on the facade. It got triggered. So we have the file size, extension, and we have my metadata that I need. And now if I need any other field, I can just go into my facade service and add this to my metadata array. Can also hit refresh, and it's going to go back to Content Hub, ask for updates. It's quite fun. Okay, so now I want to show you one last thing. Let's have a look at the raw value. I'll try to zoom in a bit more. You can also see here we have the raw value, this content ID. Zooming right to the back. Here we have it. Custom metadata, Hello London, Merry Xmas. We have it right here in our field.